Trump has made headlines for apparently falling asleep during his 79th birthday celebrations. This picture showing the US president with his eyes closed during a military parade has gone viral. My dad would call that resting his eyes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But,
yeah,
I mean, he did
on the
have
couch,
all that
just resting.
sort of sleepy Joe, and now it's tired-ass Trump.
Damn!
In case you were wondering how the world currently perceives our fearless cult leader, well, here's a couple of snippets.
Donald Trump has caused outrage for posting a picture dressed as who? Emma.
Is it the AI picture of the Pope? Awesome way to announce you're a virgin.
Ed, it's easy. He just sort of moves the white hood up a bit.
Down it comes.
It appears that after Trump held a military parade that, conveniently fell on his 79th birthday, it did, well, absolutely nothing to bolster his image across the world. The ego-driven distraction backfired bigly.
In response to this military event.
Do it peacefully. It's a vulgar display. It's the kind of thing you see Kim Jong-un, you see it Putin, you see it with dictators around the world that are weak and just want to demonstrate strength. Weakness masquerading as strength. To fet the dear leader on his birthday, what an embarrassment.
I'm all for the president appearing and doing enlistment ceremonies at military bases. I've been with the president at Dover to receive home our dead soldiers, and so those who have been killed in action, and to mourn their loss. But I just never liked the idea of the parade, because I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and the only parades I can remember are Soviet parades for the most part, or North Korean parades. And
with the parade itself being lifeless, while counter-protests erupted across the world against, the whole authoritarianism of it all.
Nicole, I want you to get off the shot of me and look down below. J.B. Rudigerram is going to show you what 20,000 people in the streets of downtown Los Angeles looks like. I'm on the 26th floor of Los Angeles City Hall on the Tom Bradley observation deck. Mayor Karen Bass says tens of thousands of people have mobilized peacefully to the streets of Los Angeles in opposition to that military protest in Washington, D.C. that you just mentioned, but also to the ongoing ICE raids that have been taking place here in the Los Angeles area over the course of the last week. This city is a city of immigrants. This city is a city with immigrants in the streets today.
And on Aussie TV, they were quick to point out the sheer hypocrisy of a man who continuously described Joe Biden as Sleepy Joe.
I sort of loved Sleepy Joe, it just had a nice ring to it. Because he had one ability I didn't have. He goes to the beach, right? And he could fall asleep on a cottage drooling out of the side of his mouth. And he'd be sleeping within minutes, carrying the aluminum chair, the kind that's meant for old people and children to carry. It weighs like about 4 ounces. And he couldn't get his feet out of the sand. And he'd sleep, he'd fall on this thing, and he'd have, he's president, so you'd have cameras. He'd go and he'd walk in the sand, and he'd fall into that thing, and within seconds he was sleeping. I'd be tossing and turning and scheming and thinking and saying, how am I going to beat China? How am I going to stop the war with Russia and Ukraine? This guy could fall asleep with cameras blazing, right? Not too many cameras were blazing, but enough were blazing.
Barely keeping his eyes open as the squeaky tanks roll by, writing the SNL skits themselves.
Trump has made headlines for apparently falling asleep during his 79th birthday celebrations. This picture showing the US president with his eyes closed during a military parade has gone viral. The event honouring both himself and the 250th anniversary of the US Army. My dad would call that resting his eyes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But,
yeah,
I mean, he did
on the
have
couch,
all that
just resting.
sort of sleepy Joe, and now it's tired-ass Trump.
Yeah, and he tripped up the stairs of the plane.
Am I allowed to say ass?
I doubt it. I mean, I know one thing for sure. Your US visa's just been revoked. I do know that.
Oh, dear.
The No Kings protest and Trump's military parade, which I describe as the saddest bar mitzvah in history. Nobody showed up for little Rachel's bar mitzvah, Jess.
That's sad. But I did think that the contrast was stark between the squeaky wheel tanks rolling around DC and the 5 million people that turned up all over the country. People were there about the ICE raids. They were there because of the cuts to VA benefits. They were there to say no cuts to Medicaid, which are in the BBB and the big, beautiful bill. It felt like it had more oomph to it.
I thought it was just inspiring. I've been sort of shocked at how unplussed or non-alarmed the American public seems by what's going on. And when you see, 5 to 7 million people in Philadelphia, San Diego, Seattle, San Antonio, taking a day from their families, their work, self-care, coming up with costumes, coming up with really funny signs, and marching as part of a collective, I just thought it was absolutely inspiring. It's every news station, including Fox, even though it had an audio of increased applause for the parade, they couldn't even help but cutting to the No Kings parades, and just the whole world saw on display the coolest rockin' party, most optimistic party that represented America, and the rich kid who threw the most fucking lame party.
And it appears that Trump's image in Australia does absolutely nothing to bolster political performance either. Australian incumbent Prime Minister Anthony Albanese secured a come-from-behind win for his centre-left Labour Party in Australia's election last month after his right-wing challenger who embraced Trump lost his seat. According to a Politico article, the Conservative Liberal Party of Australia embraced MAGA-style politics and bigged up Trump, with the challenger calling Trump a, quote, big thinker and lauded his art of the deal. And it obviously didn't go over well with the people of Australia.
If you can't see the slide into fascism that's currently happening in the United States, you are simply not paying attention. If you can't see the slide into fascism that's currently happening in the United States, you are simply not paying attention. At Donald Trump's inauguration, as the billionaire oligarchs lined up to pay their obeisance, the biggest of them all, the most highest profile of them all, the person with probably the biggest social media reach in the world, in part because he owns one of the biggest social media platforms in the world, Elon Musk, literally gave a Nazi salute at the president's inauguration. And for people who are going to try to argue that it wasn't actually a Nazi salute, I'll say this. If you're one of the highest profile people in the world and a massive global debate erupts about whether or not you gave a Nazi salute and you don't come out and say it wasn't a Nazi salute, then it was a Nazi salute. It was a Nazi salute. The United States is sliding into fascism under Donald Trump. And it is marginalised communities who are going to pay the price. Black-skinned and brown-skinned people, migrants in the US, women in the US, transgender and queer folks in the US. They're going to be persecuted and they're going to be demonised, blamed for all the problems of the day. And you know what else is going to pay the price? Nature is going to pay the price under his drill baby drill policies of destroying nature. Climate is going to pay the price, as we're already seeing a withdrawal from global climate action. President Trump is a disaster for humanity. He belongs behind bars, not in the Oval Office.
But, here at home, the message isn't great either. Trump continues to do his best SpongeBob, considering he's underwater on most issues. Everything from the economy to inflation to his big, beautiful bill, and even immigration, right? An issue that he notoriously polls well on. He is tanking.
Well, yes and thank you would be more than basically 50-50. So that's within the margin of error. This used to be his best issue, 10 plus points advantage. And there were a couple other recent polls where he was -6 and -11 on immigration. In terms of the stat, about 75% have been convicted or pending charges. Those pending charges are doing a lot of work. And the reverse of it is that 70% of people who have been detained haven't been convicted of anything, which is the threshold for people getting their due process. So there are folks sitting in cells, perhaps waiting for their day in court, or if they're lucky enough to be, sent to a foreign gulag, and they haven't actually been arraigned. No one has seen them in a court of law to decide whether or not they actually committed these crimes. What's going on with Brad Lander, who was accompanying a migrant to his immigration hearing, and he's done this a few times, is broadly speaking where the American people are, which is that if somebody is going about this the right way, if they've been in this country and they have not committed a crime, not been convicted of something, that they should be able to stay here or at least to get their due process. And I think that the images of the masked agents, pulling a candidate for mayor and our comptroller aside are going to be very resonant with folks. Importantly, Donald Trump's policy on immigration seemed like it was changing a couple days ago. Remember when he posted, he said, if people work in agriculture, they shouldn't get picked up. And if people work at hotels, et cetera, like he used to employ a lot of people at his properties. And it seems like Stephen Miller is back in charge. And I think that that's a bad thing for the country. And I think it's a bad thing for the president's immigration policy because that flies in the face of where public opinion is. I don't know why Trump has completely ceded control to Miller in terms of this, but it's not a good look and it's not going to float well with the governors that run states that have a lot of these people that keep them in business, big agriculture states, big states with, hotels, leisure, et cetera.
Get this, even Fox News polls have him slumping. That's when you know the Aussies have it right.
On every single major indicator of success for a president.
Not
economy,
majority support.
51 to 49, Kaylee. You cherry-picked that poll, and earlier this week we did it as well. Talk about our own poll.
We don't have the Jimmy Carter votes that Biden had.
Fox News poll, AP.
Love this video? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch and help us blow past 1 million followers.